What do you think?
Well, I mean, I tried to think about when this situation has happened before. In my career, it happened. I don't know if you remember Pierre Van Hooijdonk when he was at Nottingham Forest. I was there when I think Dave Bassett was the manager, and you don't know what the truth is, but from all accounts, Pierre had said that Forest had promised him that if he stayed another season to get the club back up, he could leave.
Right.
And then when it come around, he was told, no, we want this amount of money for you, which he felt was too much and was stopping him, so he didn't come into training. But this is Harry Kane we're talking about, who's the model professional. Something's been said behind the scenes because it's totally out of his character to not come into training. Totally out. If you said one player wouldn't do that, it would be Harry Kane.
Well, that's what we all thought, but it's proven to be different because he hasn't turned up as was expected yesterday at the Tottenham training ground. talkSPORT's Alex Crook brought us all the details yesterday about how he was expected to turn up for a COVID test. That hadn't happened, and then Tottenham were refusing to comment any more on the situation. I always think it's interesting when the club itself doesn't want to comment on the situation, because if everything was rosy, they would have just said, oh, no, it's all fine. You know, he was expected to be here, but he's not, and it's fine. But we're all happy, and that didn't happen. So, yes, I think there is something going on behind the scenes. I think you're quite right.
Definitely. I mean, if you take it back a couple of years, he's probably looked. Kyle Walker left, and he got 3 Premier League titles?
Something like that, yeah.
And he's probably looking, he's gone away with England, and he's thinking, all these players are winning things, and I've got 200 odd goals for Spurs. I've stayed. I've been loyal. He's Tottenham through and through. At some point, I want to win something. At some point, I don't want to be saying to my children, look, I've got a couple of shirts that I've worn for England, but I never actually got any medals to show you. And he's probably thinking down that road. And he's been promised to stay another year, probably. Daniel Levy's a hard taskmaster when it comes to deals, so he's probably hanging out for a deal. And the agents, which are the most important people in these deals, they give him advice. But at the end of the day, he's decided not to go in, make a stance. He might be right. If he's been promised he can leave, and Man City have matched the fee, and he's still not allowed to leave, then he's right. But the way I think, you've still got to go into training. You can't not turn up.
So to take us back then, and maybe this is something we'll continue to talk about, that Pierre Van Hooijdonk situation. How were you all in the dressing room when that was happening? How does it affect, or does it not actually affect the dressing room?
Well, it affects the dressing room when your top scorer's going to leave, and you think, the others who are thinking about, I've got options and they can move, they're thinking, well, if we lose him, then we're all in trouble. But I think Harry Kane's a different type of character to Pierre Van Hooijdonk. Harry Kane's Mr. Spurs, and I think he's well liked by everybody. He's gone and done well for England, so I think his teammates will be thinking, well, fair play to him. Kyle Walker's moved on and done that, left Spurs to try and win trophies. I had a look last night at the finishing position Spurs have finished in the last 15 years, and I think, they're 4th, 5th, 6th. They normally finish in around that area. 2 years ago, they were in the Champions League final. They've lost a lot of players. They've lost some managers in the meantime. And they're not in as good a shape as they were 2 years ago, in my opinion. So he's probably thinking, if I stay here, I'm not going to win anything. They're in the 3rd European competition.
Yes.
Would he want to play in that?
Europa Conference, isn't it? Yeah.
There's another way of looking at it. How can Harry Kane, one of the best strikers in the world, not be playing in the Champions League year in, year out?
Well, this is part of the reasons that he was giving when he had that interview with Gary Neville, how he said he wanted to be playing at the very top level of football, how he wanted to emulate Lionel Messi and Cristiano Ronaldo for all that they've won, to be in the conversation for the Ballon d'Or. These are the reasons he was giving to Gary Neville prior to the Euros, which led to all of this talk about him moving on. And it's funny when people are saying, he is the utmost professional, and I'm sure he is in most ways. But even that interview itself, I think a lot of people started to question Harry Kane, because you knew what he was trying to achieve with that interview. He was trying to drive something. He was trying to push through a move from Tottenham. Whether people want to believe it or not, I think that's quite an obvious thing. Why else would you talk about it? Why else would you talk about wanting to win trophies? Why would you talk about a fee? Why would you say, I value myself at around 100 million? Daniel Levy knows, I've got a good relationship with Daniel Levy. He was talking about all these things that are sort of putting the onus back onto Tottenham by saying, it's time for me. He was basically saying it's time for me to move on. I have to move on.
Or has he been told by Daniel Levy that this is the situation, you're going to be leaving in the summer?
Right.
And he's talking as if to Gary Neville, as if there's going to be no obstacles put in my way.
Mm-hmm. That's possible.
His agent has probably spoke to Man City and other clubs, so they're going to come up with a fee. His agent's probably told him, don't worry, they're going to come up with a fee. Daniel Levy's said you can leave. So he's talking to Gary Neville, maybe trying to prepare the Spurs fans for his departure, just letting them know and trying to explain his reasons. Maybe.
Well, you put across a good point there, and maybe that is it. But sometimes I still think there is a time and a place, and you don't necessarily talk about it until it's all signed and sealed, and then you can start talking about why you're leaving. And I think at that point, when he had that interview, I think some people would have started to question his professionalism. And then we heard stories emerging from the England camp. I think it was the Telegraph that said some of his England teammates were saying that he had told them he wasn't going to turn up for Tottenham training, which, again, at the time, people were like, no, that's not Harry Kane. Harry Kane, of course, he is the most professional player there is. He's going to turn up. And yet he hasn't yesterday. It's all coming true. So the question is, and something for us to discuss after the break, is does this tarnish his Tottenham legacy? It's just a wrangle that's going to be happening right now, because technically it's Tottenham that hold all the cards, because Harry Kane is very much their player. They want Manchester City to match what they believe Harry Kane is worth. Now, City, obviously, at this present moment, it feels, don't want to pay what is Tottenham's valuation. Harry Kane, as I mentioned in his interview with Gary Neville, for some reason thought he was worth around £100 million, which I think most of us probably think is a little less as to what would be expected for him. How will this one play out for you, Dean? Do you think that Manchester City will eventually get their man? And if they don't, how does Harry Kane go about repairing the situation at Tottenham?
Well, I think, unfortunately, he's going to come out the baddie in all this. Yeah. It's a triangle of bartering going on right now. We've seen it before. It's not the first time it's happened. Man City can't be blamed for not wanting to pay over the odds, even though the agents have been negotiating behind the scenes, and it would have gone something like this. Did they go to Man City and say, I think 100 million might do the deal? Okay. Around that ballpark figure. Mm-hmm. Then they go back to Spurs, Daniel Levy, I think Man City will pay what you're asking. Then the agent tells Harry Kane, I think this deal's on. We've sorted the wages out. They're not a problem. So he goes, okay. He spoke to Daniel Levy. You're going to let me go? Of course. Man City have just got a match, what we say. So you can't blame Man City for not wanting to play too much. You can't blame Spurs for trying to get the best fee possible. So who's going to get the blame for this? Harry Kane. Harry Kane's going, well, I ain't sitting here waiting for you two to keep negotiating, and I've been told I can leave. So he's made a stand. But I think they'll just ignore it, because
Tottenham.
Well, football's become a business. It's not sport anymore. It's a business, a money-making business. And where they used to haggle, when I was playing, they used to haggle over $1 million. Now they're haggling. These decisions are like 15, 25 million if they get it wrong. So Harry Kane's just a pawn in the middle. He's going to get the blame.
Yes, and as things stand, he is getting the blame from a lot of sectors, shall we say. I don't know. I think there are some Spurs fans that obviously want the situation to be repaired. They want him to return to the Tottenham, lineup, and if he has to play out his contract. And there will be some Spurs fans right now that are saying, just go, get out, because you're not helping the situation at all. And the last thing that Spurs want is to be getting towards the end of the transfer window for the transfer to then go through, for them not to then be able to replace Harry Kane in their Tottenham squad. So there's so many factors in all of this.
He's done enough for Spurs, though. Everyone knows he's loyal to Spurs. All the Spurs fans know. They know he stayed longer than he did. He didn't have to stay another 2 or 3 years, and he stuck with it.
But he signed a deal, didn't he? He signed that new deal. So there is something convinced him to stay.
Well, also, the club would have said to him, if you sign this long-term deal, our valuation of you is going to be this much as well. So we got a gentleman's agreement, you can leave, but we need you to be on a long contract so that the transfer fee we are asking is relative to your contract. So, and he's gone along with it. And you've got to remember, one of these agents might be getting something within sort of 25 million quid. If this deal don't go through, how much is Harry Kane's agent losing? Well, so they drive it as well.
Yeah, no, I see that, and I understand where you're coming from as well, because, as I just mentioned, he did sign that new contract, but sometimes it's done for the benefit of the club as much as it is for the player as well.
talkSPORT Breakfast with Laura Woods, Monday to Wednesday morning 6 till 10. On AM, on DAB, via the talkSPORT app and on your smart speaker. talkSPORT.